So let's look at a couple digestive problems because, that's fun. The first one is choking. What's the universal sign for choking? The person is not making any noise. If they're coughing, leave them alone. All right? You don't want to smack them on the back because what's happening is that they're able to still breathe. And if you smack them on the back, what's going to happen is whatever they may be choking on is going to go further down into their esophagus, into their windpipe. And that's not a good thing. When we swallow, the epiglottis covers the windpipe so that the food or the bolus can go down the esophagus. However, during choking, if you're talking while you're eating, which my mother told me never to do, but what happens is you are inhaling food and the food is going down the windpipe or trachea. One of the ways to try to reverse this is with the Heimlich Maneuver, also known as abdominal thrusts. Please don't do this unless you've been trained, but what you're doing within a Heimlich Maneuver is you are getting up under the ribs and forcing the bolus up out of the trachea so that they can expel it. Other digestive problems include vomiting, which we also refer to as reverse peristalsis. Peristalsis tends to move with gravity. However, depending on what's going on, too much eating, too much alcohol, some kind of infection, reverse peristalsis gets rid of the contents from the stomach. Then we have diarrhea, which is when the contents move out the other direction. Indigestion is a common problem. Indigestion is also known as heartburn. There are certain foods that may trigger heartburn. Individual results may vary. If eliminating certain foods from your diet reverses the symptoms, good for you. A more severe form of heartburn is called reflux disease or gastroesophageal reflux disease. This picture shows what's happening when the muscles of the lower esophageal sphincter, or what we call in this class the cardiac sphincter, when they close, it prevents the contents of the stomach, that semi-liquid mass of partially digested food, from moving up the esophagus. And what happens during reflux or severe reflux is that those muscles are weakened. The cardiac sphincter is not able to close completely, and the food moves back up through, it refluxes up through the cardiac sphincter into the esophagus. Think about it, and I'll ask you in class, I hope, why does it burn when you have the contents of the stomach entering into the esophagus? So we have the proper functioning of the esophagus, the cardiac sphincter, and the contents of the stomach on the left, and we have the improper functioning. Improper functioning leads to inflammation of the lower esophagus. Other digestive issues include ulcers. Most ulcers are called peptic ulcers because that's another name for parts of the stomach. And the primary cause of ulcers is something called H. pylori or Helicobacter pylori. You can call it H. pylori. I'll come back to that, but also use of certain anti-inflammatory drugs like Aleve, naproxen, Advil, Motrin. These kinds of things can irritate the digestive tract. It suppresses certain signals that tell the body to make mucus that helps protect the stomach lining from digesting itself. And when those signals are being suppressed by these anti-inflammatory drugs, then the intestinal lining can be exposed, leading to ulcers. There are also certain disorders that can cause excessive acid secretion, which can wear away at the stomach lining. The stomach is a muscle. Muscles are made up of protein. Protein begins to get digested in the stomach. So if acid is something that digests protein, when the lining of the stomach is exposed to acid, that will wear away at the lining of the stomach, leading to the development of ulcers. There are 3 types of peptic ulcers. And again, ulcers occur when the lining of the stomach is worn away. The mucosal lining, that mucus that lines the stomach to protect it from digesting itself from the acidic chyme. When that gets worn away, that leads to ulcers. Esophageal ulcers occur in the esophagus. Why do you think that occurs? The most common ulcers will occur in the stomach itself. And then there can be ulcers in the duodenum, which is the upper part of the small intestine. Why do you think ulcers might also occur in the small intestine? These two gentlemen, Drs. Marshall and Dr. Warren, received the Nobel Prize for the work they did on discovering many ulcers were caused by bacteria, that it's a bacterial infection. What they discovered was this bacteria can be treated, this bacterial infection can be treated by antibiotics. It's not a simple treatment. It can take 2 weeks to a month of taking these antibiotics, and for some people it's very difficult, but once the bacteria is gone, you no longer have an ulcer. As a matter of fact, one of these doctors, I can't remember which one, was so devoted that he actually purposefully infected himself with H. pylori just to prove that it was caused by a bacteria, that ulcers were caused by bacteria. Strategies for dealing with gastrointestinal problems. You can pause this and have a look. And here is Sydney in our final slide with an overview of digestion, absorption, transport, and excretion of carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and fiber. An overview of everything. So in this topic, our gastrointestinal tract, we looked at chemical and mechanical digestion. We looked at the secretions, the enzymes, and the hormones. We looked at the anatomy of the gastrointestinal tract, the organs, the sphincters that separated one organ from another. We looked at the accessory organs. We briefly talked about absorption, how nutrients were absorbed from the intestinal tract into the circulatory system, and how they were transported. We talked about feasting and fasting, how the body uses these products of digestion, these catabolic breakdown products in feasting and fasting. By the way, let's remember, if it's feasting, if we're using these, those would be anabolic processes. I'll ask you what that means. We excrete what the body doesn't use. We looked at the different ways in which water, CO2, and breakdown products get excreted. And we looked at some digestive disorders. And of course, you know when I say we, I mean me. But I'll look at it with you in class. Thank you.